5 years ago, he walked out on his wife and their newborn triplets, leaving her with nothing but hospital bills and heartbreak. While he built a new life with his glamorous fiancée, she worked day and night, raising 3 children on her own. No help, no calls, no visits. Then one morning, a gold-embossed invitation arrived in her mail. His wedding. He didn't send it out of love, but to gloat, certain she would watch his perfect life from the sidelines. But on the wedding day, as the music swelled and guests whispered about the dazzling bride, the doors opened, and she walked in. Dressed elegantly, flanked by 3 stunning children, her entrance was so commanding that the entire event froze. Cameras clicked, guests gasped, and the groom's smile faltered for the first time. He thought he left her broken, but her arrival would shatter his perfect day in ways no one saw coming. Hello, family. Welcome back. Before we begin, I have a small but heartfelt request. Please subscribe. Your support is what keeps these stories alive. Every time you click that button, you're helping us share voices that would otherwise be forgotten and stories that deserve to be heard. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from, because together, we are not just telling stories, we are keeping hope alive. It was raining the night Evelyn Carter met Daniel Reed. She was standing under a broken umbrella outside the emergency entrance, her nurse uniform damp from a 12-hour shift. He was the only man crazy enough to show up at 2 a.m. with a coffee cart and a grin. "Coffee for the heroes," he said, his smile so bright it almost challenged the thunder. Evelyn laughed. "You're selling coffee in a storm?" "Not selling," he said, setting down the tray. "Donating. Marketing idea. Free tonight, and maybe they'll buy tomorrow." She raised a brow. "Smart. You're ambitious, Daniel Reed," he said, extending a hand. "Future CEO of something big. I just haven't decided what yet." She shook it. "Evelyn Carter. Future person who's going to finish her shift without collapsing." He laughed, and in that sound, confident, alive, she heard something she hadn't in a long time. Possibility. The weeks that followed turned into months. Daniel started visiting her during breaks, always with coffee, sometimes with flowers, and always with stories. He talked about his dreams, a startup that would build affordable medical tech. He wanted to make millions, but more than that, he wanted recognition. "I just don't want to live small," he said one night, sitting in his beat-up car outside her apartment. "My father worked himself into the ground, and no one even remembered his name. I want to matter." Evelyn smiled softly. "You matter to someone already." He looked at her, quiet for once, and kissed her hand. "You shouldn't say things like that." "I might believe you." They became inseparable. She worked long hours, but he always waited for her after shifts. He would walk her home, holding her hand, promising that someday they'd live in a house with a porch swing and a view of the city skyline. When he finally asked her to move in, she said yes, not because of the promise of the skyline, but because she saw goodness beneath his hunger. At first it was perfect. They laughed, they dreamed, they built each other up. Daniel's small company began to take shape. Evelyn supported him however she could, cooking, helping organize his papers, even lending him part of her savings to get equipment. "You're my lucky charm," he'd tell her. "When I make it big, I'll build you a clinic with your name on it." She believed him. The first crack appeared the day she met Margaret Reed, Daniel's mother. Margaret was all pearls and posture, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "So," she said over dinner one night, looking Evelyn up and down, "you're the nurse." Evelyn nodded politely. "Yes, ma'am," Margaret sipped her wine. "Daniel tells me you work in a public hospital. That's admirable." Her smile was brittle. "I'm sure you're good at caring for people. But Daniel's future requires more than care. It requires connections," Daniel frowned. "Mother," Margaret ignored him, "I just hope you understand that love and legacy don't always fit in the same frame." Evelyn smiled. "If legacy means kindness, ma'am, I think they do." Margaret's lips tightened. "We'll see." After that night, things changed. Daniel started spending more time with investors. He stopped joining her for dinner, and when he did, he was distracted. "I'm doing this for us," he'd say whenever she asked. I can't keep living small, Evelyn. I need to be someone. You already are someone, she'd whisper. But he never seemed to hear it. 3 months later, Evelyn found out she was pregnant. She stood in the tiny bathroom staring at the test strip, her hands shaking. She laughed and cried all at once. When Daniel came home that night, she ran to him, holding the test behind her back. "Close your eyes," she said playfully. He grinned. "You got me a car?" She rolled her eyes. "Just close them." He obeyed. She held out the test. "Surprise." His smile froze. "What's that?" "Daniel, we're having a baby." The silence that followed wasn't joy, it was dread. He stepped back, rubbing his temples. "Now? Evelyn, I just closed a deal. I can't. We're not ready for this." Her voice broke. "We'll figure it out together, like we always do." He turned away. "You don't understand. Investors are finally taking me seriously. A baby changes everything. It makes me look unstable." "Unstable?" she repeated, disbelief turning to anger. "You call a family unstable?" He snapped. "I'm trying to build something big. You can't understand that world." She swallowed hard. "I understand love, Daniel. I thought that was big enough." He didn't answer. He just left the room, leaving her alone with her shaking hands and silent tears. Months passed. He became colder, harder to reach. When she went for checkups, she went alone. When she decorated the nursery, she did it with her best friend, Lena. "Maybe he'll come around," Lena said gently, painting the crib white. Evelyn nodded, but her eyes were tired. "He has to. He's the father." When labor came early, Daniel wasn't there. He didn't answer calls or texts. She was rushed into surgery. 3 babies, a complicated delivery. When she woke up, groggy and aching, the nurse whispered, "Congratulations, sweetheart. You have 2 girls and a boy." Evelyn smiled weakly through the pain. "Tell Daniel. Tell him he's a dad." The nurse looked uneasy. "We called him." No answer. Days passed. She waited. Each hour stretched into guilt and anger. Finally, on the 4th day, he walked in. Not with flowers or joy, but with a designer suit and a phone in hand. She looked at him, her face pale but hopeful. "You came." He set his phone down, not meeting her eyes. "We need to talk." Her heart dropped. "Now? Daniel, the babies. I can't do this," he said bluntly. "This isn't the life I want." Evelyn stared, speechless. "What are you saying? I can't raise kids. I can't stay here. You knew I had plans." Tears blurred her vision. "Plans? These are your children." He ran a hand through his hair. "I didn't ask for 3. I didn't even want one. I'm sorry, Evelyn, but you're holding me back." She felt like the floor vanished beneath her. "Holding you back?" she whispered. "I carried your children. I bled for them. You can't just walk out." He turned toward the door. "I already did." Minutes later, Margaret Reed entered, her heels clicking against the hospital floor. She looked at Evelyn with the same cold disapproval as before, only sharper. "My son can't stay in this situation," Margaret said. "You've made your point. But you can't trap a man with pity." Evelyn's voice trembled. "He's not trapped. He's a father." Margaret took out an envelope. "Take this check. It's more than enough for you to disappear quietly. Don't ruin his name with drama." Evelyn looked at the check, more money than she'd ever seen, then back at the woman who'd raised the man she once loved. She tore the paper cleanly in 2. "His name will ruin itself," she said softly. Margaret's eyes narrowed. "You'll regret this." Evelyn shook her head. "No, ma'am." "He will." That night after they left, the room was silent except for the soft coos of her newborns. She sat on the edge of the bed, body aching, tears streaming down her face. She looked at her babies. Tiny, perfect, innocent. "Your daddy's gone," she whispered, "but I'm here. I'm not leaving." The nurse came in to check her vitals, saw her crying, and said gently, "You should rest." Evelyn shook her head. "If I rest, I'll break." The nurse hesitated. "Do you have family who can help?" "No," she whispered. "I'll figure it out." She picked up her son first. kissed his forehead, then her daughter's. "You'll never cry for him," she said quietly, "the way I did." Outside, rain tapped against the hospital window. In another part of the city, Daniel sat at a dinner table, surrounded by investors and journalists. Camilla Hayes, glamorous, confident, laughing too loud, leaned into him, whispering, "Congratulations, darling." "You finally got what you wanted," Daniel smiled weakly. "Almost." He thought of Evelyn briefly, the look in her eyes when he walked out, but he pushed it away. He told himself she'd survive. She was strong. She'd always been strong. But somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered that he'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. Back at the hospital, Evelyn rocked her babies, whispering lullabies through tears. Every breath hurt. Every heartbeat felt like betrayal. But even through the pain, she made a promise. "I'll make it," she said softly. "Even if the world forgets me, I'll survive for you." The nurse turned off the lights as dawn began to rise. Evelyn sat awake, holding her children close, her heart breaking. Yet somewhere beneath the hurt, something stronger began to grow. The hospital lights were harsh that morning. Evelyn sat at the edge of her bed, still in her gown, signing her discharge papers with trembling hands. Her newborn triplets slept beside her, swaddled and peaceful, unaware of the war their mother was walking into. The nurse asked softly, "Is anyone coming to pick you up, sweetheart?" Evelyn shook her head. "No, it's just me." The nurse hesitated, then patted her hand. "You're strong, honey. You'll be fine." Evelyn smiled weakly. She didn't feel strong. She felt hollow, but she gathered her babies anyway. One in her arms, two in a borrowed stroller, and stepped out into a world that had already decided she'd fail. The first year was a blur of exhaustion and noise. 3 babies crying, bills piling up, neighbors complaining. The nights bled into mornings. Evelyn barely slept. She worked double shifts at the hospital, leaving the triplets with an older neighbor, Mrs. Lopez, who watched them out of pity more than payment. Sometimes Evelyn paid her with homemade soup because cash was gone before the week ended. Rent was overdue more times than not. The ceiling leaked. There were nights when she'd rock her babies under a single flickering bulb, whispering stories she didn't believe anymore. One night, when the power went out again, she lit a candle and sat on the floor, holding her son. He was feverish. Tears filled her eyes. "God, please," she whispered. "Don't let them pay for my choices." But deep down, she knew this wasn't punishment. It was transformation, and she wasn't done yet. When the triplets turned 2, Evelyn's body had adjusted to surviving on little food and less sleep. She worked every shift she could, day, night, weekends. Her co-workers pitied her. Some whispered behind her back, "She's the one who got dumped, right? The nurse with triplets?" Evelyn heard them, but she kept her head down. She wasn't working for their approval. She was working for survival. On her rare off days, she cleaned houses for extra cash. She learned to fix her own appliances. She even taught herself bookkeeping from YouTube tutorials, tracking every cent. There were moments she almost broke, like when her car was towed because she'd missed the payment, or when she came home to find an eviction notice taped to her door. That night she sat on the floor, her baby sleeping beside her, and whispered, "No one's coming to save us." So her first chance came unexpectedly. One of her elderly patients, Mrs. Jennings, didn't want to move into a nursing home. Her son, desperate for help, asked Evelyn if she could check on her privately after work, just for a few hours each week. Evelyn hesitated. "I don't have a license for home visits." "You're a nurse," he said. "You've got more heart than the agencies do. I'll pay cash." That first week, she made more money caring for Mrs. Jennings at home than she did in 2 hospital shifts. The next week, Mrs. Jennings's neighbor asked if she could help her mother too. By the 3rd month, Evelyn was juggling 5 private clients, all through word of mouth. She turned her tiny kitchen table into an office. A notepad became her ledger. A cracked phone became her hotline. She named it Healing Hands Home Care, simple, honest, and from the heart. Life didn't magically get easier, but it got meaningful. Evelyn began meeting other single mothers through the families she served. They shared stories, food, sometimes tears. She noticed most of them wanted to work but couldn't find flexible jobs. So she trained them herself, teaching basic caregiving skills, patient handling, and how to treat clients with respect and dignity. Her kitchen became a small classroom on Saturdays. The women called her Miss Evelyn. They said she gave them hope. She just smiled. "I'm not giving hope," she'd reply. "I'm giving work." Hope's something you find on your own. By the end of the third year, Healing Hands had 10 part-time caregivers. They wore simple white polo shirts with a stitched logo Evelyn had hand-sewn herself. Clients loved them because they cared, really cared. Money began to trickle in. Not wealth, but stability. Evelyn moved her children into a better apartment. Small but bright, with real windows and a view of the street. The triplets grew fast. Ella was quiet and thoughtful, Emma was bold and funny, and Ethan, her only boy, was protective beyond his years. "Mommy works a lot," Ethan said one night, "but she still hugs us more than anyone." Evelyn smiled. "That's my job, too." 5 years passed. Healing Hands had grown from one woman and a notepad to a real company with staff, uniforms, and loyal clients. Evelyn still worked long hours, but now it was purpose, not punishment. One autumn afternoon, she was rushing between client visits when her phone rang. "Miss Evelyn, it's Mrs. Peters down on Willow Street. My neighbor, Mr. Grant, fell again. He's not breathing right." Evelyn's heart raced. "I'm on my way." She drove like her life depended on it. When she arrived, she found Mr. Charles Grant, an elderly man in his 70s, slumped on the porch, his face pale. Without hesitation, she dropped to her knees and began CPR. Minutes later, he gasped and came back. She stayed until the ambulance arrived, holding his hand. At the hospital, the doctor told him, "You're lucky she showed up when she did." Mr. Grant smiled weakly at Evelyn. "You're not just Healing Hands, you're a miracle." She laughed softly. "Just doing my job, sir." He reached into his gown pocket and handed her a business card. "Come see me when you have time. I owe you lunch." She pocketed it, not thinking much of it. A week later, Evelyn visited him at his home, a quiet, elegant place filled with books and framed photos. Mr. Grant was sitting by the window, sipping tea. "I meant what I said," he told her. "You saved my life. Now let me return the favor." She shook her head. "You don't owe me anything." He smiled. "Then humor me. Tell me about your business." At first, she hesitated. Then she told him everything, from the nights she couldn't afford baby formula to how she built Healing Hands from her kitchen. He listened intently, his eyes soft but sharp. "You've built something special," he said finally, "not because it makes money, but because it has heart." "That's rare. I just want to keep helping people," she said. He leaned forward. "And I can help you do that. I used to invest in startups before I retired. If you'll let me, I'd like to mentor you. Maybe even invest." Evelyn blinked in shock. "Invest? In me?" He chuckled. "In you, Miss Carter. Not just your company. People with your spirit deserve a chance to grow." That day changed everything. Under Mr. Grant's guidance, Healing Hands transformed. He helped her register the company legally, build a small office, and hire professionals for accounting and marketing. He introduced her to contacts in the healthcare industry who respected his word, and soon hers too. He taught her how to pitch ideas, negotiate contracts, and protect her business legally. Within a year, Healing Hands Home Care became Healing Hands Group, a recognized name in the city's private healthcare market. Evelyn, once mocked as the nurse with triplets, was now the woman investors wanted to meet. Her picture appeared in a local magazine with the headline, "From Nurse to Founder, the Woman Behind Healing Hands." When she showed the article to her children, they jumped around the living room cheering. "Mommy's famous," Emma shouted. Evelyn laughed, hugging them tight. "Famous or not, I'm still just Mom." But deep down, she felt something she hadn't in years. Pride. Across town, Daniel Reed's life was everything he dreamed, at least on the surface. He was now CEO of Reed Innovations, his face plastered on business magazines. His fiancée, Camilla Hayes, was the talk of the city, glamorous, witty, and perfectly curated. To the world, Daniel looked like a man who'd made it. But behind closed doors, his success wasn't as clean as it seemed. Many of his early products, affordable health monitoring devices, were based on notes and sketches Evelyn had once helped him brainstorm back when they were together. He'd never credited her. His board called him a visionary. He called himself self-made. But every time a nurse used one of those devices, some part of him heard Evelyn's voice whispering, "Do good work, Daniel. Make something that helps people." He ignored it. He had Camilla now, and wealth and validation. That was enough. Or so he thought. It was a quiet Tuesday morning when Evelyn's mail arrived. The triplets, now 5, were eating breakfast. Ella was reading a book, Emma was trying to feed pancakes to their cat, and Ethan was pretending to be a superhero with a towel as a cape. "Mommy, there's shiny mail," Emma said, pointing at the gold envelope sticking out of the pile. Evelyn wiped her hands, opened it, and froze. The envelope was thick, the paper embossed with gold lettering. At the top, it read, "Daniel Reed and Camilla Hayes cordially invite you to their wedding celebration." Her breath caught. For a moment, she just stared at it. Not in sadness, but in disbelief. Inside, a handwritten note in Daniel's familiar cursive. "You're welcome to attend, if you've managed to find something nice to wear." Evelyn blinked slowly, then let out a small, humorless laugh. "Mommy?" Ethan asked, tugging her sleeve. "Who's Daniel?" She folded the letter, setting it aside. "Just someone who forgot what love means." "Is he bad?" Emma asked. Evelyn smiled faintly. "He's lost." "That's worse." The children went back to eating. Evelyn stood by the window looking out at the city skyline. The same skyline Daniel once promised they'd share. She wasn't crying. She hadn't cried in years. Instead, she felt calm, almost amused. She poured herself coffee, opened her laptop, and glanced at the folder labeled Healing Hands Group Expansion Plan. He wanted her to see his perfect life. He wanted her to remember what he took, but she had something better. Proof that she built something from ashes. She picked up the invitation again, smirked, and whispered, "He wants to see me broken. I'll show him what he built instead." 5 years earlier, she had walked out of a hospital with nothing but heartbreak and 3 newborns. Now she walked into boardrooms and signed contracts under her own name. He abandoned her when she was at her weakest, thinking she'd never rise again. But fire doesn't destroy steel. It forges it. And Evelyn Carter had become pure steel. The morning sun poured through the high windows of the Crystal Manor, striking the chandeliers until they shimmered like waterfalls of light. Cameramen buzzed around like bees, catching every glittering detail. The roses, the marble floor, the champagne flutes perfectly lined in rows. It was the wedding of the year. The groom was Daniel Reed, the self-made millionaire with the charming smile. And the bride was Camilla Hayes, the city's favorite socialite, beautiful, poised, and ready to make headlines. Every seat was filled with people who mattered: journalists, investors, old money families, and celebrities. Even the mayor was rumored to be attending. As guests arrived, whispers filled the air like low thunder. "I heard he was married before." "Yeah, to some nurse. Had kids too, right?" "Triplets," someone said. She disappeared after he left her, probably too embarrassed to show her face. Camilla heard every word and smiled faintly. "Let them talk," she told her bridesmaids. "She'll never show." Shame doesn't buy dresses. Her laughter was soft but sharp, the kind that left a sting. Daniel adjusted his tie in the mirror, his reflection smooth and confident. Yet when no one was looking, his smile slipped. Something deep in his chest twisted. Not guilt, not exactly, but a strange unease he couldn't name. Still, he brushed it off. Today, he told himself, is the beginning of perfection. The orchestra began to play. The ceremony was about to start. Camilla walked down the aisle, her gown a masterpiece of crystals and silk. Cameras flashed. Daniel smiled for the photos, the way successful men do. Charming, polished, untouchable. The priest began the vows. "We are gathered here today to celebrate the union of..." And then it happened. The heavy double doors at the end of the hall creaked open, slowly, loud enough to cut through the music. Everyone turned, and the world seemed to stop. Standing in the doorway was a woman in a gown of soft gold satin, elegant, refined, commanding. She wasn't flashy. She didn't need to be. Her beauty wasn't in the fabric or jewels, but in her calm, collected strength. It was Evelyn Carter Reed. Behind her walked three children, two girls and a boy, dressed in matching ivory outfits, their heads high, their steps confident and graceful. Gasps spread through the room. Someone whispered, "That's her." Another murmured, "Those must be his kids." Cameras swiveled. The orchestra faltered and went silent. Daniel froze. His practiced smile cracked. Camilla's bouquet trembled in her hands. "Daniel," she hissed under her breath, "what is she doing here?" He didn't answer. His lips parted, but no sound came out. Evelyn took one slow step forward, then another. The soft click of her heels echoed like a heartbeat in the silent hall. When she reached the center aisle, she paused. Her eyes locked on Daniel. He swallowed hard. "You weren't invited to make a scene," he whispered harshly. Evelyn's lips curved in a faint smile. "You invited me to watch," she said quietly. "I just chose a better seat." A ripple of whispers spread through the guests. Some raised their phones. Others simply stared, wide-eyed. Camilla stepped forward, her voice tight. "You have no right to be here." Evelyn's tone stayed calm, almost gentle. "No right. I had every right 5 years ago when I carried his children and built the foundation he's standing on today. You're enjoying the castle I helped build, darling. The least I can do is see how it turned out." The crowd gasped. Daniel's face darkened. "Enough, Evelyn," he said through clenched teeth. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No," she said softly. "I'm reminding you." She turned slightly, her voice carrying across the room. "Ella, Emma, Ethan, say hello to your father. He's been too busy to meet you." The children looked up at Daniel, their eyes bright and curious. One of the girls, Emma, tilted her head. "Is he the man who made Mommy cry?" The hall went completely still. Cameras flashed. Gasps rippled. Someone dropped their champagne glass. It shattered on the marble floor. Camilla's face turned red. "This is harassment," she shouted. Evelyn looked at her, unbothered. "No, Camilla. This is history, just catching up to the present." She reached into her small clutch and pulled out a sealed envelope. Calmly, she handed it to the priest. "Before he vows faithfulness," she said evenly, "he might want to explain this." The priest frowned, confused, and handed the envelope to Daniel. "What is this?" Daniel opened it, and his blood ran cold. Inside were documents, neatly copied and dated, showing he had forged Evelyn's signature 5 years earlier to transfer her shares in Reed Innovations entirely to himself. Her name, once listed as co-founder, had been wiped clean through a fake signature in a backdated form. A murmur swept through the crowd. People were already taking photos of the papers. The screens of phones glowed everywhere. Daniel looked up, sweating. "These are fake," he said quickly. "She's lying." Evelyn tilted her head. "Am I?" A deep, calm voice spoke from the back of the hall. "Actually, she's not." All eyes turned. Mr. Charles Grant, sharp suit, silver hair, and undeniable presence, walked down the aisle, his cane clicking softly with every step. "Mr. Grant?" one of the investors whispered. "What's he doing here?" He reached the front and looked directly at Daniel. "She's telling the truth," he said. "I've reviewed the records myself." Daniel's face went pale. You know her?" Mr. Grant smiled slightly. "Quite well. She saved my life, and in return, I've made it my business to protect hers." He faced the guests and lifted the papers Evelyn had brought. By law, Evelyn Carter Reed is still the co-founder and rightful majority shareholder of Reed Innovations. She owns 40% of this company. I own 30%. That means, Daniel, you don't run Reed Innovations anymore. We do. The room exploded with whispers. Cameras flashed like lightning. Daniel tried to laugh, his voice shaky. "This is ridiculous. You can't just walk in and—" "And what?" Evelyn interrupted. "Tell the truth?" Her voice was still calm, but each word landed like a hammer. "You left me with debt, Daniel. I left you the evidence. You can't erase what you built on lies." "Not anymore." Camilla stepped back, shaking her head. "Daniel, is this true?" "Of course not," he snapped. "She's twisting things." I just, Camilla's eyes filled with tears. You used me. You used everyone. She turned to Evelyn, voice trembling. You knew this would happen. Evelyn's expression softened slightly. No, Camilla. I just knew the truth always arrives, even when it's late. Camilla's tears turned to fury. She raised her hand and slapped Daniel across the face. The sound cracked through the hall. Then she turned, heels clicking furiously, and stormed out. The reporters caught everything. Margaret Reed, seated in the front row, gasped and fainted as her friends scrambled to catch her. Daniel stood frozen, eyes darting wildly as cameras surrounded him. This is insane, he shouted. You think you can ruin me? Evelyn looked at him steadily. You ruined yourself, Daniel. I just walked in to watch. The priest quietly closed his Bible. I think this ceremony is over. Guests began to rise, whispering, filming, texting. The orchestra packed up silently, and the hall filled with a low murmur of disbelief and scandal. Daniel's shoulders slumped. For the first time, he looked small. Evelyn turned to leave. As she did, the crowd, hesitant at first, began to clap. It wasn't loud or wild. It was quiet, respectful, like applause for someone who had survived the impossible. She didn't bow or smile. She simply nodded once, took her children's hands and walked toward the door. Each step echoed again, calm and steady, the same rhythm she'd built her life on. Mr. Grant followed her out, pausing at the threshold. He looked back at Daniel, who stood amid the ruins of his perfect day. You know, Mr. Grant said softly, she never wanted revenge. She only wanted justice. There's a difference. Then he left. Outside, sunlight poured through the glass doors, warm and golden, the same color as Evelyn's gown. Reporters called after her, flashing cameras, shouting questions. Mrs. Reed, are you taking control of the company? Did you plan this revenge? Was this your comeback moment? Evelyn turned once, calm and dignified. I didn't come here to take revenge, she said. I came to take back what was already mine. The crowd fell silent. She turned and walked away, her children on either side, their small hands gripping hers. Behind her, inside the shattered fairy tale of the Crystal Manor, Daniel Reed stood alone. The cameras had turned away from him. The lights that once adored him now burned mercilessly on his downfall. He looked at the empty aisle, the abandoned bouquet, the guests filing out in disgust. The priest was gone. The music had died. The world had moved on without him. For the first time in years, Daniel understood what Evelyn had felt the day he left her. The cold, hollow silence of being truly alone. Outside, the crowd parted for Evelyn and her children as they stepped into a waiting black car. Mr. Grant held the door open. You handled that with grace, he said. Evelyn smiled faintly. Grace is stronger than anger. It lasts longer. The car pulled away, and she looked out the window at the fading image of the Crystal Manor. Inside those glittering walls, Daniel's empire had just crumbled. She turned her gaze forward, the city skyline rising ahead. Her reflection in the window looked calm, powerful, finally free. She thought of the girl she'd been 5 years ago, the nurse who cried alone in a dark hospital room and whispered, "You did it." Her children laughed in the back seat, chattering about how pretty the wedding hall had been. Evelyn smiled, this time for real, because the woman Daniel had left behind no longer existed. The woman driving away owned her story now, and the world finally knew it too. The world woke up talking about the wedding that never happened. Every news site, every gossip column, every morning show carried the same headline in bold letters. Ex-wife reclaims company during groom's wedding. Clips from the scene flooded social media. Evelyn's calm entrance, Daniel's stunned face, Camilla's slap, the priest closing the Bible. The internet turned it into legend overnight, comment sections filled with one word over and over again, iconic. For the first time in her life, Evelyn Carter was famous. Not for tragedy, but for triumph. But she didn't smile about it, not once. She sat at her kitchen table the next morning, the triplets eating cereal at her side while news anchors dissected her life like a fairy tale turned courtroom drama. Viewers are calling her the most composed woman in America. Her business, Healing Hands Group, reportedly saw a spike in new contracts. Mr. Daniel Reed's accounts have been frozen pending investigation. Evelyn muted the TV. The silence was sweeter. "Mommy, everyone's talking about you," Emma said, swinging her legs. Evelyn smiled faintly. "They'll talk for a while. Then they'll find someone new." "Are you in trouble?" Ethan asked. "No, baby. I'm free." She meant it. For Daniel, freedom had turned to chains. His face was plastered on headlines he could not control. Reed Innovations under fraud probe. Investors pull out after wedding scandal. He sat alone in his penthouse, the view of the city stretching out below him like a kingdom he could no longer touch. His phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Lawyers, reporters, board members, until finally he hurled it against the wall. Camilla had left a note before moving out. "You lied to everyone, including yourself." His mother, Margaret, had stopped answering calls. The family name she guarded so fiercely was now whispered like a curse in high society halls. For the first time in his life, Daniel Reed was invisible to the people who once chased his shadow. He poured himself a drink, but it tasted bitter. On the muted TV screen across the room, a photo of Evelyn appeared, standing tall outside the courthouse, hand in hand with her children, smiling as reporters surrounded her. The caption read, "Evelyn Carter officially takes control of Reed Innovations." Daniel stared at the image until his vision blurred. He whispered into the emptiness, "I did this to myself." 3 weeks later, downtown streets glittered with banners that read, "The Reed Carter Foundation. Grand opening." Evelyn arrived in a sleek black car. The air smelled of fresh paint and new beginnings. The building gleamed with glass panels reflecting the morning sun. A line of photographers waited behind velvet ropes, but she didn't rush. She stepped out gracefully, dressed in a white suit. Elegant, understated, powerful. Mr. Grant met her at the entrance. "Are you ready for this?" Evelyn smiled. "I was ready 5 years ago. I just didn't know it yet." Inside, the atrium was filled with guests, business leaders, healthcare partners, journalists, and families her company had helped. A giant banner hung above the stage, "From Healing Hands to Helping Hearts." When she walked up to the podium, the crowd rose to its feet. Flashbulbs lit her face. She took a deep breath, steady but warm. "5 years ago," she began, "I was a single mother with 3 babies and no safety net. People said I'd never make it. They said I'd drown under the weight of my mistakes. But I learned something. Storms don't drown you if you learn how to stand in the rain." The room was silent, hanging on every word. "I built Healing Hands because I wanted to help people who were forgotten. People like I once was. And today, with your support, we're taking it further. The Reed Carter Foundation will provide health care, scholarships, and housing support for single mothers across the country. Because no woman should have to choose between survival and dignity." Applause erupted. Cameras flashed again, but this time it wasn't scandal that filled the lenses. It was respect. When the noise died down, a journalist raised a hand. "Mrs. Carter, do you have a message for your ex-husband?" The room held its breath. Evelyn smiled, calm and radiant. "Yes," she said. "I thank him for walking away. Sometimes God removes people so your hands are free to build something better." Laughter and applause followed, but Evelyn simply stepped back from the microphone, nodding once, graceful as ever. That evening, Daniel sat in his dark penthouse, the city lights flickering across the floor. The television played her speech again on repeat. He didn't move. He barely breathed. He watched the way the crowd looked at her, not with pity, but awe. He saw the woman he once dismissed as small become larger than his entire world. He remembered her tears in that hospital room, her trembling hands when she'd begged him to stay. He remembered the words he'd thrown like knives. "You're holding me back." He laughed bitterly under his breath. "You were the only thing holding me together," he said into the empty room. The glass in his hand slipped and shattered on the floor. But he didn't flinch. He just sat there, staring at the broken pieces, realizing that everything he'd built had cracked the same way, from the inside out. The weeks that followed brought headlines of their own. Camilla Hayes files fraud suit against Daniel Reed. Margaret Reed steps down from family charity amid scandal. Evelyn Carter announces $10 million scholarship fund for single mothers. Investors who once chased Daniel now sought meetings with Evelyn. Hospitals signed contracts with her foundation. Universities offered her honorary degrees. But she never bragged. When reporters tried to pull drama from her, she answered with grace. Pain taught me patience. Struggle taught me focus. The rest is just timing. At night, when the house grew quiet, she'd check homework, braid hair, listen to bedtime giggles, and whisper to her children, "We made it." Ella wanted to be a doctor. Emma wanted to run the company. Ethan said he wanted to protect people like Mom did. Evelyn kissed their foreheads and thought, "That's enough legacy for me." Months passed. The world moved on, but the legend remained. The woman who walked into her ex's wedding and took it all back. What no one saw were the quiet mornings, Evelyn jogging at sunrise, stopping at her office early to review programs, meeting young mothers who came to thank her. One afternoon, she visited a small community center that the foundation had renovated. A teenage mother handed her a handmade bracelet. "You make me believe I can start again," the girl said shyly. Evelyn held the bracelet like treasure. "You can," she said. "Starting again is how we win." Back in his empty apartment, Daniel received an envelope from the court, the final notice confirming that he no longer held any authority over Reed Innovations. The letter was signed by Evelyn herself. He read it 3 times, then folded it neatly, placing it in a drawer beside an old photograph. Evelyn in her nurse uniform, smiling at him years ago when the world was still kind. He stared at it for a long time. Then he whispered, "I'm sorry." No one heard it but the city humming beyond the glass. The day of the foundation's official ribbon cutting arrived under a clear sky. Evelyn walked hand in hand with her children through the glass doors of her new headquarters. Inside, employees clapped and cheered. Cameras followed, but she barely noticed. Her eyes were on the 3 small faces beside her. Ella and Emma ran ahead, laughing, their matching dresses swishing with each step. Ethan stayed beside her, his tiny hand warm in hers. "Mom," he asked softly, "are we rich now?" She smiled. Rich enough to never be afraid again. They reached the lobby, where a massive glass wall reflected the city skyline. Evelyn stopped and looked at their reflection. 4 figures framed in gold light. She saw the woman she had become, confident, calm, unstoppable. The nurse, the mother, the founder. She whispered to her reflection, "I don't need revenge. I have peace, and proof that I survived." Behind her, Mr. Grant joined quietly. "You've done good, Evelyn," he said. "I just turned pain into purpose," she replied. "That's all." "Not all," he said. "You turned loss into legacy." She looked back one last time through the glass at the busy street below, then turned toward the elevators. "Come on, kids," she called. "Let's get to work." The elevator doors closed slowly, her reflection disappearing as the city lights glowed around her. Outside, banners rippled in the evening wind, carrying her name, the Reed Carter Foundation. The city would remember that day not just for the scandal that had started it all, but for the story that ended it. A woman who rebuilt her life from nothing, who met betrayal with grace and power, and who rose higher than anyone expected. Her story became more than gossip. It became a lesson, one whispered in coffee shops, shared in online posts, and told in quiet kitchens where other women fought their own battles. She did it. So can we. And somewhere high above that city, as the last rays of sunset kissed the glass towers, Evelyn Carter's office light burned steady, warm, unwavering, untouchable. He abandoned her, thinking she'd drown in her tears. But she learned to build ships out of her pain. Never underestimate a woman who was forced to survive. She'll come back owning the storm.